Gissele, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No worries. So I'm about halfway through your book, Reimagining Work. I'm really enjoying it. It's not exactly what I expected, right? I thought it was going to be more about the workplace and stuff like that, and it tends to be a lot about spirituality, worthiness, self-love, self-worth, which is great. Um, I guess the part that I really resonated with was the stuff around worthiness. I'll just tell you a bit about my own story. I for the majority of my life, I've really, I guess, thought that I'm not good enough, thought that I'm not worthy. And that's led to a lot of, I guess, overworking, obsession with achievement. And I got to a point recently where I realized I keep hitting my goals and nothing changes on like the happiness spectrum, I guess you could say. And rather than just like aimlessly continuing to go, okay, well, once I get here, I'll be happy. I realized I think I need to turn this light on myself and really inspect the way that I talk to myself and treat myself. Because basically, I mean, talk to myself and treat myself like I would never treat anybody else. So I wanted to start by asking, where does I guess, the need for worthiness or the lack of self-worth, where does that usually come from?
That's a great question. I want to start with this is not the book I thought I was writing. Let's just put it out there. I was really interested in compassion in the workplace. I was trying to implement compassion in the child welfare system at the time and didn't see a lot of the discussions on the how, like the specific aspects of compassion in listening and speaking. So those elements are in the book. But as I was writing it, what came through really was the need for us to really look at ourselves and the reasons why we attract certain workplaces, the reasons why we allow certain things to happen to us in terms of like even how much we allow ourselves to achieve. And as I started peeling back the onion of my experience with, like my achievement and how I define my worth, we're taught to define our worth externally. We are taught to define our value externally. And as a person who for her, achievement was everything. It was the way I got out of a house where I had experienced trauma. It was the way that I sort of like saw myself as valuable when I didn't feel that I was attractive or good enough, like beauty wise. So for me, nobody could take my achievement, my education, and how much I had climbed up the ladder. Nobody could take that away from me until I had to leave it. I no longer fit that system. And I needed to redefine how I wanted to work in the future and what success looked like. And for me, we as children are conditioned, and I'm using the word condition on purpose. We're conditioned to look outside of ourselves for worth, for guidance, for love, for approval. And it starts with our parents, and they were parented by people who taught them that. And then when you go to the school system, that's taught to continue. There's a right answer and a wrong answer, and you're supposed to do things specifically a specific way. And you are taught not to look inward. Everything is outward. People, you're supposed to follow what they tell you. And so we become really, really separated from ourselves. And we stop looking at ourselves and asking ourselves, what do we really want out of life? We start to get conditioned as to the things we should want. We should want to get married. We should want to have a mansion. We should want to be millionaires. We should want to do all of these things. And this has created the world we currently have. What we're not doing as parents, as educators, is teaching children that they're inherently worthy, even if they don't achieve anything, even if they don't do anything other than exist. And fundamentally, we are worthy just because we exist. But that's not what's taught. And so the more that we try to achieve things externally, the more unhappiness we will feel because it's like we're trying to fill it up with the wrong thing. I'll give you a perfect example. Greed is just a fear of lack and an issue of worthiness. People say to themselves, oh my God, I can't believe these billionaires, isn't 500 million enough? No, it's not. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to fill a hole with money that can't be filled with money. It can only be filled with our own self love and self compassion, our own understanding that we're inherently worthy. We don't have to earn it, the same way as Louise Hayes says, or used to say, we don't earn the right to breathe. It's just naturally there. We don't have to do these things. We are inherently worthy just because we're alive. And being alive is a miracle in itself, which we don't often acknowledge. So we are conditioned by our parents, who were conditioned by other people, and in the school system, that criticism is a good motivator, and it's not. We are taught that pushing ourselves beyond our expectations and doing things we don't want to do, like stuff in the school system, is the key for us to achieve. And so you're just doing what you were conditioned to do. You're just doing what you were programmed to do, to look outside of yourself, to value things you don't like. So a return to ourselves is an unlearning. It's a deprogramming. And I'm not judging the school system or our parents. We were doing the best we could with the level of consciousness we had. But now it's a time to do something different. And I love what you said, like you acknowledge the fact that you can be very critical of yourself. If you wouldn't talk to your best friend the way you talk about to yourself, then that's what you need to focus on and change. But we have been conditioned, and unfortunately, that's kind of where we are. I was not aware that I had issues of worth. That was the tricky part, because I wasn't the kind of person that said I hated myself. I didn't do self-harm. I didn't do any of that stuff in a very covert way. How I did it was that I limited my ability to live my dreams. And as I was meditating one day, I was like, I was so frustrated with myself. I'm like, why can't I make this happen? I do all of these great things. And I remember just sitting in silence and saying, okay, I got to listen to myself. I got to go inward, because all of the answers are within. I believe each of us has a seed within ourselves that has all of the information we need, and all of the resources, and all of the names of people that are going to help us on this journey in the best possible capacity. So I decided to go inward and ask myself, okay, so what's really going on? And I heard in a very distinct voice, I don't feel I'm worthy to live all my dreams. And I'm like, where did that come from? Like, who's saying that? But when I looked at my life, it was true. It was true. It was always capped. And so
can I ask what you mean by worthy there? Is it I don't deserve to? I'm not good enough? What exactly is the definition of worthiness?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Great question. So I had this because I dug deeper. I was like, okay, so what does that mean? And curiosity, like you're asking, is phenomenal. If you are able to examine your thinking without judgment, you get the answers. So the first thing that came up when I asked that question was, why would you be able to live your dreams when your parents, your grandparents, and your ancestors weren't able to? You're not special. Why they didn't live their dreams? They lived in misery. They faced child abuse. They faced poverty. Why you? So there was an element of not deservability or not feeling deserving to do something that all of my people hadn't been able to do. And so I really had to examine that and say, well, I can be the first and I can show them the way. I can show them that living our dreams is the key to the path. The other one was that I hadn't realized that I had internalized some messagings as a child as my fault. So there are things that happened to me in my childhood that had nothing to do with me, that had to do with my parents' limiting beliefs, that my parents' needs that weren't addressed. But children, because they're so self-focused, as a survival mechanism, right? Like they only really in the beginning have their world. They don't see, first they're completely connected with their parent, with their mother in particular, and then they become, oh, I'm a separate being. Interesting. And then it becomes all about them. And so it's really hard for them to go, oh, my parent hit me. Oh, my parent wasn't able to be there for me emotionally because they weren't parented or because didn't get their needs met. Your immediate, as a kid, your solution is, it's my fault. I'm not worthy to receive their love or attention. I must not be good enough. I must not be worthy for them to see me, for them to give me voice and participation. And so those sorts of stories kids weave, even something I've spoken to people, even something as innocuous as you not getting your favorite toy at Christmas, something you really, really desired. Sometimes kids internalize that as, I didn't receive it because I wasn't worthy to receive it. They're not going to think my parents may not have money and may have been too embarrassed to tell me or didn't want to worry me. And so I had to really unpack those beliefs as merely beliefs that then created an identity of someone that couldn't live her dreams. And so the first thing I really started with was how I spoke to myself. And again, I was not like a covert, I hate you, you're a terrible person, whatever. But I was acting in the same way. I just didn't use that strategy. So that strategy isn't wrong. It's just what it is. And so I really had to focus on, how am I treating myself? What thoughts am I allowing to live in my headspace? And what thoughts am I allowing to dictate how I feel? So because I grew up with people that were fairly traumatized, I had a fairly negative perspective. Everything was negative. It was very reactive. I couldn't trust anyone. And so I had to kind of reprogram my brain to think differently. And I had to create some space. And that's why I love meditation. I absolutely love it. I do it every day. And when I don't do it, I find that, I miss it.
Me too.
Meditation helps you. Yeah, meditation helps you get space in between your thoughts so that then you can choose your thoughts and take your power back. Whereas before, I would let my thoughts dictate, because a thought would happen and then a very strong emotion. And then what happens is the downward spiral, right? Have you been in a downward spiral before? As a person who used to have really bad anxiety, it's awful. You have a negative
majority of
thought
my
that
life.
feeds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a negative thought that feeds a negative emotion that draws another negative thought and another negative emotion. And then once you're in the spiral, it's very hard. It can feel very hard to get yourself out. But a great strategy to do that is, like, if you're having a hard time controlling your mind and saying, you know what, that's not true. I'm going to choose my next thoughts and then choose to align the emotion with it. If you can't get control of your mind, exercise your body, move your body, do a practice, because it's really hard to control both the mind and the body when it's tense, when you're in a downward slope. But if you manage one of those things, so manage your body, exercise, do like a movement thing, that forces your body to believe it's safe. Because no person in danger is going to sit there, well, I'm just going to go to the gym here while I get chased by a bear. No, the fact that you're taking time out to exercise signals to the body that it's safe. Or if you're going to do qigong or do something else. And so that helps the body relax. And then the mind is easier to take control. And so I had to learn how to really pick my thoughts and not allow my thoughts to create negative experiences for me and scare me to death, like scare myself into not living my biggest, boldest dream.
I just have to say, I
And
feel
that
like
takes
a lot of
practice.
this,
Yeah.
I feel like you're talking directly to me with a lot of this. I mean, this is a lot of the stuff I've struggled with my whole life. And I've kind of developed a routine and habits that I know I need to do on a
Yeah.
daily basis just to feel normal, right?
Hmm.
And on the top of that list is meditate and train. So they're two things that I do every day. I'm
Yeah.
probably not as able to explain why that helps as much as you, but I just through trial and error
Yeah.
know that's what I need to do to kind of feel okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And even if you're not able to explain why, your trial and error is your inner compass that was telling you this is what's going to work. So, this is why it's so important for us to go back inward and listen to our inner compass and create some space between, because a lot of us, in the book, I talk about identity. And it's so funny. I've had these experiences in my life where it's the thought that creates sort of an alignment. And when you're in the energy of something, that sort of attracts it. So abundance isn't about making money, like working. It's an energy. It's an energy of freedom. It's an energy of openness. I have been in a very secure, high paying job and not made as much money as I did, for example, when I was not doing anything or doing something different. And in my mind, that doesn't compute. But my energy has been different. And so that enabled me to attract different things that I had worked for years to. I wanted to be a professor for a very long time. And, I had applied and that kind of never worked. And when I shifted my energy, it sort of landed in my lap. I was sort of like, oh, this is interesting. Like, just sort of came to me, and I didn't even have to interview for it. It just sort of came, and I said, oh, I'll just put my resume in and whatever, and then it was mine. And so it really is about becoming aware of the stories we're telling ourselves, the beliefs, and then the accompanying emotions, because everything is a thought. We were once a thought in God's source universe. Before we came to be, we were a thought. And if you don't believe that, that's okay. You were your parents' thought before you came into this incarnation. Even if you don't believe in God's source universe, you were a thought. They thought of a baby, they thought of a name, they thought of a whatever, and then you came into being. So everything starts with a thought. Sometimes it feels like you don't notice a thought, you go straight to the emotion. But before you even had an emotion, you had a thought. And so taking the time out to be aware of what you're thinking and how you're speaking to yourself and how you're limiting your life really is the key to starting on the journey to really living your dreams. And the reason why loving ourselves and being compassionate to ourselves is so important is because you need a lot of love and compassion for yourself, because the journey is not linear. It's like this, right? Like you take 2 steps forward and you think you're on the right path, and something triggers you or something happens and you're down here feeling like crap and thinking, I don't know if I can do this. And that is where the love for yourself, the compassion for yourself says, you can and you will. Remember that other time when you didn't feel you could do it? Remember that time? We got this. Just take one little step. And what I've seen in this world and in some of the work that I do now in terms of really sharing stories of love and compassion and how impactful that is because what I've observed and experienced personally is the more love I have for myself and fill my bucket from the inside, the more love I have to spill to other people. And one of the things that I experienced that I did not expect was the more I loved myself and filled my cup, the less I needed to change people or felt like they needed to act differently. They had no power over me anymore. Their behavior didn't impact how I felt about myself and my life anymore. And so, if you have a whole bunch of people in the world who are loving themselves, who understand they're enough and they're worthy, there is no need for war. There is no need for conflict. There is no need to control other people. And in the book, I talk about the true definition of power, which is, the power, the idea of power that we've been taught is power over or force. That's not true power. I've seen truly powerful people that they radiate this love. They have a love for humanity, and they're not impacted by the behavior of others, by the conflict of others, by how much, even if people take things away from them, they're like, okay, I can always make more. I'm good. You have it because I love you. And if you need to take that, okay. That's a different level of power, and the ability to be able to love themselves and love other people and see their best. That is transformative. That's transformative. And that's my greatest wish for all of us. My greatest wish is that we could understand how amazing and beautiful we are, and how inherently worthy, and how we've been bamboozled basically. And the people we've been bamboozling is ourselves.
So I want to go back. I mean, speaking about the whole being bamboozled, a lot of this, I think you said, is linked to, I guess, educational system, parenting style, stuff like that. Why do you think this has kind of initially happened? Is it basically is it a productivity hack gone wrong? Is it the idea that we think we'll get more done and I guess achieve more in society? What happened? What went wrong?
Yeah, by no means do I believe that I can answer that, but this is my belief. Okay, so I do believe that we are all God source energy, which means that everything is the divine, everything is God source, everything is like nothing can be outside of it, right? So God source energy wanted to experience itself, not outside of itself, but within itself, because when you are all that is, you can't know yourself outside of that, right? And so I believe that we were all created so that all that is could experience itself, and that we were given the same sort of, because God, all there is all that is. We have the same abilities that all that is and source has. And so I think somewhere along the way, like before, we were very connected to each other, to ourselves. I've had experiences of telepathy, it's very weird. It's very, very strange to hear people's thoughts, because you're like, oh, I don't know this person, but I'm hearing all of these things. And so I think that's our natural state. But I think what happened to the beings that we are is that we became further and further and further away from ourselves and who we truly are. And if you look at the history of human beings, when you look at like indigenous tribes, even like African tribes, like the Egyptians were black, like they were black, right? Because think about it, if you've ever been to Egypt, it's so hot out there. They had to be, right? And
Mm.
so you have all of these groups that were connected in community and connected to nature and connected to ancestors. And that's how we really are, or were. And then you had groups who became colonizers. This isn't just white people. There were colonizers that were, like Latin American. There were colonizers that were, like Genghis Khan. Like these colonizers didn't feel like they had enough. So they had to go and take more. This goes back to the greed conversation we were having about like when you try to fill that hole with other stuff, it's never going to be enough. Your achievement, Luke, is never going to be enough because you're trying to fill that hole of your own lack of love and your own lack of worth with external things. That's why millionaires, billionaires, people that are super successful, celebrities, not happy. Why? They've achieved their fame. Why? Because they're trying to fill a hole that can't be filled except by their own love and compassion. So you had these colonizers that were going around and taking these individuals, destroying these communities, putting the people in residential schools, slavery, all of those things. And if you look at least in North America, it was the rise of the individual, right? The individual, the self-made man, which is, I'm going to be honest, a lie that people told themselves, because all those self-made people had people that worked underneath them that helped them build companies. Because if they had done everything themselves, they would have had to ship everything. They would have had to do everything themselves. Like they would
Yep.
singly have had. So there was a whole bunch of people that believed in their vision and helped them. But we've kind of listened to this whole self-made man belief, and out came the rise of individualism. And we became very lonely, very disconnected, very lots of mental health, no connection to nature, no connection to ancestors. All of these things have hindered us and made us feel as if we don't know who we really are. And we feel so alone and disconnected because the world that we have created doesn't work. It's not who we are. We're meant to live in community. We're meant to live in partnership. We're meant to live in connection with nature, and especially in connection with ourselves. I've worked with people where, like, one of my questions for them was, what's your like biggest boldest dream? Let's visualize, what's your biggest boldest dream? And they can't tell me. They can't tell me. And in conversation, I found out that when they were young, they were mocked by their parents because, like, their parents believe, no, you should do this or that profession. And so they learned to not tell themselves or allow themselves to have dreams because they don't want to be shamed. And so we become so disconnected with ourselves that we don't longer know ourselves. And so this journey I feel that we're on is us coming back to ourselves, to each other, to see each other as brothers and sisters, to ourselves, to understand how truly powerful we are. We're not, I don't believe that we are these small beings that are so fragile that at any moment we could get a disease or all of these things that are just going to impinge on us and then we're going to die. I don't think that that's like, it doesn't, honestly, look, it doesn't make sense in my head because where did we come from? How is this world even made? The fact that I recently kind of really bruised my toe, almost broke it. It was really painful. And very soon after I saw that my toe was bruising, that's my body's way of healing it. So how could we believe that the body can heal toes and scars and cuts, but not other health issues? It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
So I want to take this, I guess, to a practical level.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I mean, the majority of my life, I've really struggled with worthiness issues, and that's led to a lot of, I guess, the two major issues that's led to is, I guess, workaholism and alcoholism. And a lot of it
Yeah.
is just due to obsessing over, um, yeah, needing to prove myself to the world. I think what I told myself, even if this is slightly subconsciously, is if I don't achieve, if I don't add value, if people don't see me as able to do things that other people aren't able to do, that I guess I won't be loved. And some of the
Yeah.
self-talk around that, I guess for the majority of my life has been quite brutal. And I almost don't think internally I deserve to have a good life. How do I unwind a lot of this stuff, right? So, again, where I'm currently at is a long time I thought if I'd built a business and got wealthy, all of my problems would dissipate, right? And then just
Yeah.
through meeting those goalposts time after time, I got to the point where okay, I'm never going to fill this hole. Okay, so how do I actually, on a practical level, start turning this ship around?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. Well, I want to say a few things before we could talk about that. The first thing is I think we do our boys a huge disservice as a society because we don't allow boys normally to feel their full range of feelings. What I mean is that most boys are taught that anger is the only acceptable emotion and sex is the only way to closeness. So many boys who just want to be hugged and nurtured and loved and seen can feel they only can get that through sexual contact. And boys are not nurtured to cry, to feel excitement, to feel all the full range of emotions that make human beings human. And crying is an important emotion. it actually, I don't remember what research I was looking at, but they were talking about how most difficult emotions, like the thought and emotion process, is actually quite quick. It only goes through like 19, like it's only like a few minutes. Like you have a thought, you have an emotion. And if you allow yourself to feel the fullness of the emotion, it'll work through you. But we have been taught to suppress and keep in. And so what you're doing is you're holding on to all of those difficult emotions that you haven't enabled yourself to process, including heartbreak, hurt feelings, loss, all of those things that as a kid, had you been allowed to experience those difficult emotions, right? Like crying and having a tantrum, tantrums are fine. Tantrums are fine. The kids, if you actually watch little kids, what I mean is they will have a difficult emotion. They will blow up and then they'll get over it. They'll move on.
Can,
If
can
you're
I
there as a
interject here?
nurturing parent, yeah, for sure.
Okay, I want to tell you about an experience I had recently,
Yeah.
because it does relate to this. So,
Yeah.
um, before I started reading your book, the last book I read was The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. I'm coming up to
Oh,
1 year.
nice.
Yeah, I'm coming up to 1 year sober in a few weeks, and I found myself like, so basically the start of the book is she goes through some of the situations that she got herself
Yeah.
into when she was in her active addiction. And as I was listening to it, I was resonating with it and I could feel my emotions come out. I could feel myself wanting to cry and I could feel myself wanting to break down. And my reaction to that was, I got to turn this book off and go do something else, right? So that was my reaction, and like because I was like not allowing myself to accept that. Was that the wrong thing to do? Is that where you're going here?
So there's no right and wrong. Let's
Yeah.
start
Yep.
there, right?
Yep.
So what was coming up for you in that moment was an opportunity to release. So whatever that was helping you, because again, sometimes I feel like this world is a little topsy turvy. And sometimes for me, there's a little bit of a struggle for that. What I mean is that, we villainize people for having addictions. Addictions is a symptom. It's a coping mechanism. It's not the problem. The problem is what led to the addictions. But we villainize people as weak because they're trying to cope the best way that they can in a world that doesn't help you. So for you in that moment, there's no right or wrong. So when something gets triggered in us, right? If you allowed yourself to have cried and allowed yourself to it probably would have been a very powerful release that would have helped you kind of unleash some of the bottled up emotions. But compassion says that we have to titrate that because sometimes I can feel so overwhelming. It feels very frightening. It can feel like you're going to die. Like your mind tells you, I've been there. I've been where the point where you're like, oh, I have to feel these really difficult emotions of this trauma experience. But your mind tells you, if you feel it, you're going to die. It doesn't feel good. You're not going to die. And you have to learn, and you're not really going to die, but you have to learn to sort of titrate and go, okay, so maybe that day wasn't the day to be able to do that. But if you say, tomorrow I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to try again, that's totally okay because that emotion is waiting to be released. And if you have the courage to be able to do that, you can do it. Sometimes the mind will fight you on it. And this, by no means is this your fault, Luke. You've been conditioned to suppress those emotions. You've been taught that only certain emotions are okay and other emotions are not. So going back to the kids naturally have big emotions. And if we allow them to feel it and show up as a safe space parent and hold them in that difficult emotion, it passes quick and they move on with their lives. They don't even think about it anymore. It's a moment of like, as a parent holding space. I wasn't allowed to experience my difficult emotions because my parents couldn't hold them. They couldn't cope with them. So they tried to suppress it. Don't have difficult feelings. Always be agreeable. Always be acceptable. Always do this. I can't hold space for your emotions. And I internalized that. I thought it was my fault. But then when I became older, I realized, they didn't have any capacity to hold difficult emotions. This is why, again, we have the world that we do. We can't have difficult conversations. People really struggle. This is why we have the cancel culture. Oh, I'll just cancel you. I don't have to listen to you. But the key to coming together and coming closer is having difficult conversations and being able to sit there with your difficult feelings so that you can come closer to one another. So you can then actually sort of, instead of pushing further apart, come closer together, right? And actually having difficult conversations, I've had numerous with my children as well, it bonds us closer. We were able to overcome, forgive each other, all of those things. But again, you're not taught that. So I would encourage you, if you can, to pick up that book again and go back to that place and see and allow yourself to explore some of those difficult emotions, because they want to come out, to be seen and to be released, which is the most important part. So going back to your question of how do I start? The first thing is, when you have those difficult emotions, allow yourself to feel them. But where the compassion comes in is, if it feels too overwhelming, because there is a safe zone, right? Like everybody has their comfort zone, right? And over here, right outside of it, is the growth zone, right? But beyond that is the danger zone, which means if you go from safety to danger zone, you will not be able to release those emotions. That's too much. But if you allow yourself to just go a little bit and say, I'm going to allow myself to feel this a little bit. And then when I get to my danger zone, I'm going to go hit the gym, or I'm going to go do workout, or I'm going to go listen to this different podcast or whatever. So allow yourself to start dipping into your growth zone. So that would be the first thing.
It's funny because I use that same analogy with, I guess, when I'm coaching staff and stuff like that, right? Like with sales, there's the comfort zone, the growth zone, and
Yeah.
I guess I call it the trauma zone, but I like the danger zone as well. So I've used that analogy
Yeah.
a lot, but I've never actually turned that around and used it on myself. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. The second thing would be, as a starting point, is one of the beautiful things about compassion is without judgment. So start to just observe the thoughts you're having, how you're speaking to yourself. Just start there. So start to really observe. You can take half an hour, you can take 20 minutes. Just start to observe the thoughts that you're saying to yourself, especially when you are, negative thinking or saying things, right? Just observe it. And then you can also write them down. And then later on, you can look and say, is this really true? No, it's not true. Look, it's a wonderful man. He's very successful. He's done all these things. He survived all of these things. And so you can start to actually flip the script on some of those beliefs, right? And starting to change some of those thoughts will start to cultivate warm feelings in your heart. And I would also invite you to do some meditations that actually help you. There's lots of free stuff on compassion. Like there's the self-compassion break, which is like, one of my favorite questions to ask is, what do I need in this moment? So if I'm really struggling with something, I'll go and ask myself, or I'm struggling with someone, what do I need in this moment? Okay. I need validation because this person is really triggering me and they're saying some nasty things, and I don't really, it's making me feel unvalued. So, or devalued. I'm going to give myself some validation. I'm worthy. Even if this person doesn't see it, that doesn't negate it. My perspective is also worthy. So I'm going to share it, even if they don't want to hear it. And so I'll give myself what I need in those moments. Instead of looking for someone out there to give me what I need, I can tap into my inner resource. And the best piece of advice I can give you, Luke, is you actually have within your heart the map through to your dream in terms of you loving yourself fully. The same way that you knew to, like use the exercise and try all those different things, try different things and allow your heart to tell you what the path is. You have it in you, like it's like a seed in your heart. So water that seed, go inward and say, okay, what's my next step? And then you will be guided to read something, to talk to someone, to try different practice, to follow someone, or to just do something for yourself. And step by step, you will take yourself there. I'm always hesitant to give people like, this is the path to take, like do this or do that. Like you can try different things, but only you, there's only just you, Luke. You are the only you in this whole wide world, not even twins. Twins aren't exactly truly identical. And so the path that you're going to take is uniquely yours. Some things will resonate with you and do that, more of that. The things that don't resonate with you, discard. But in your heart is the path. If you're willing to quiet your mind and just say, okay, I'm willing to love myself. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I'm willing. And that's enough for the universe to start to show you different things that you can do. And the willingness really is like the thing. You just tell you're willing, because many people aren't willing. And that's what I say to my kids. That's what I say to people I work with, all of that stuff. I say the starting point is always just to be willing. Be willing to say, I'm willing to love myself more today than I did yesterday, but I don't know how. Show me the path. And let it go.
So a lot of that felt like it leaned towards, I guess, awareness and intentionality.
Yeah.
Which takes me to the next thing I wanted to talk about. I mean, well, first of all, I think a lot of people get this confused. Do you have a definition that you like to use for mindfulness?
Yes. Yeah. And
Because
there's many different.
I think that word gets thrown around a lot, but realistically, I don't think a lot of people really understand what it means.
Yeah. And the confusing part, it's mindfulness, right? Like it says it's mindful. So if you think of your mind as full, right? For me, mindfulness really is present moment awareness. Just, and what I mean by present moment awareness is like right now, like now, meaning a lot of the times the things that we're worried about or that we're telling ourselves aren't happening in the moment. And for me in my journey, feeling safe has been the number one thing that I have needed to learn. And so in this moment, I'm safe. In this moment, I'm loved. In this moment, I have everything I need. And so present moment awareness reminds us that we have power. Our power is only in the present. We don't have any power in the past. It's already gone. We don't have any power in the future in terms of like, I mean, there's one possible future of many possible potential futures, but we don't have any power there, right? Because it hasn't happened. Our power is only just now, in this now. And in this now, the majority of things that we fret about or think that we're not worthy or acceptable aren't happening. And so going back to our present moment, whichever way that is, whether it be meditation, some people don't enjoy meditation. That's okay. You can paint, you can do things that keep you in the present moment. You can go for a nature walk. There's different things that you can do to bring you to your present moment, which is your center of power. We disempower ourselves when we go to the future or go to the past or go to the future. And for me, having had gone through anxiety is too much future. Depression is too much past. So really in the present moment is where I am most safe, where I am most powerful, and really where I can then start to choose what I'm going to experience. And I say that I say that consciously. I've learned that everything is a lens. Like everything is perception. Have you ever had like a conversation with someone and you experience the same thing and they come at it from completely different experience? You're like, did we both
Yes.
attend a different event? Right? Like,
Yes. Yes.
or were we at a
Yes.
different meeting? What happened? It was because each of you chose to focus your lens in different things. Somebody could have had the lens of a positive experience, and so everything got colored from that lens. And somebody had a lens of lack, and so everything from that perspective. What you're trying to do is you're trying to change your lens. And some people believe that your higher self or higher awareness is just a greater lens. So it's just a broader lens, a bigger lens that enables you to say, okay, I'm seeing this from my human ego self. I'm going to change my lens. I may not know how to, but I'm willing. I'm willing to be open to see this from a broader perspective. How do I change my lens? And I have found that when I use that strategy, I see things I hadn't seen before. Things were there that were always there, but I never saw them because I was looking at it from a place of lack. Actually reminds me of my children when I say them, hey, can you, like, they'll always ask me, Mom, where are my socks? Where are my socks? Right. And I'm like, I'll go there. And I'm like, this is exactly where I told you they were. Well, we didn't see them. Of course you didn't see them. You were with the lens of, I can't find it. I can't find it. I can't find it. So the sock literally could have jumped out in front of you and you weren't going to see that. Whereas I came in with the lens of, it's there. I'm going to see it. It's there. And so I came and went, okay, there's the sock, right? It's about really changing our lens to see how worthy, how beautiful, how powerful we really are.
So I want to ask how then meditation fits into this, and I'll tell you what it does for me. So I've been meditating fairly solidly or consistently for about 5 years now. I do every day, and what it's allowed me to do is there. I guess there's that saying between stimulus and response, there is a gap, and it allows me to find that gap and not get dragged into an emotional place where I don't want to be. The other thing it allows me to do is when I am, we spoke before about spiraling. When
Yeah.
I mean, I have a quite a stressful, life, job, all that stuff. When
Yeah.
I catch myself spiraling, or catastrophizing, I'm able to identify that I'm talking myself into this and then be like, is this actually, I guess, practically useful? And I'm able to actually talk myself back out of it. I mean, that's what I get out of
Mm,
mindfulness, meditation. So yeah, I
mm.
guess then my next question is, how does meditation fit into this?
Yeah. I just wanted to comment on something you said because I don't want the audience to miss it.
Sure.
You, which is, you said, I realize I'm talking myself into this. And that is so, so powerful. I want the audience to understand that because there's so many things that we accept in a very passive way, including our negative thoughts. Our mind is sort of like the risk advisor. Like, when you have a company, you have the CEO and then you have all of the people, right? And so the risk advisor is like one of the people, right? And the CEO goes to the risk advisor and says, hey, what do you think of this plan? And the risk advisor says, well, this could be a possible lawsuit or this bad thing could happen. And then you go, oh, okay, thanks. I'm just going to keep it in mind with all of the other feedback I've received. Anxiety is when the risk advisor is the CEO literally sees everything as a risk. Everything is a danger. Everything is a risk. And so what you're doing is you're taking your power back from that risk advisor. You're saying, you know what? I have a choice, and there is a space where I can make that choice. And we allow ourselves to talk ourselves into many different things and accept passively. Living from a place of lack, we accept that belief. Having to grind it out to succeed, we accept that belief. Feeling like we're not good enough, we accept that belief. Having to look outside of yourself for your love and compassion, we accept that belief. There's no jobs, we accept that belief. We don't have enough, we accept that belief. So these are all things we've been accepting. These people are our enemies, we accept that belief. We have to go to war, we accept that belief. And so choosing not to accept these beliefs and taking your power back, I think is really, really important. So I wanted to mention that. I sort of came onto meditation in a very surprising way. I'd sort of dabbled with it before, but if you don't mind, I'll share this story.
Please.
So my husband and my sister-in-law were doing these classes on metaphysics with this lady who was doing, she did a lot of healing and did meditations and all that stuff. But this is before, way before I even knew what it was. I was very research-based, very evidence-based, and that was what my degree was in. I had completed a master. I always needed evidence for everything. And so I decided to join this class because I'm like, I don't know what my husband's doing. Like, what is this metaphysical nonsense? Let me just go see, because he kept inviting me. So I went just to humor him, basically. So she decides that we're all going to do a meditation. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to try this and close my eyes. And right. And she told us to go somewhere. Like, she's like, well, like astral travel or project or whatever this place. And I'm closing my eyes and I'm literally in a void. Like it's really literally like a nothing, nothing, nothing. And there was a level of peace. As a person that had horrible anxiety and had trauma and all these trust issues, there was a level of peace I had never encountered. I was just being, my body wasn't there. It was just my consciousness. And I was there. And it was just amazing. I was just sitting there in bliss, basically. And I heard somebody say, because I didn't know where I was, you have to come back now. And I'm like, nope, I have never encountered this level of peace. I can't go back there. I can't go back to the anxiety. I can't go back to the fear. I can't go back to the lack of trust. I just can't do it. And they said, you have to come back. You have to come back. You have children. You have to come back. This is when my kids were very little. And I'm like, no. And they're like, you have to come back. You have to come back. Anyways, I didn't know if this was real or not. So I'm in this class. I open up my eyes. The whole class is staring at me, like literally staring. And the teacher goes, oh, you didn't want to come back. And I was like, what? Like, is this real? So I go home. My husband and I go home. The babysitter is freaking out because my daughter, who was very, very young at the time, kept saying, Mommy's not coming back. Mommy's not coming back. And I was like, holy mackerel. I don't know if I want to ever go back that deep again. But I started to explore that there was more to this, And like you, it gave me space between those negative thoughts. It gave me a break from that story, that identity of the fearful person, the identity of the person with anxiety, the identity of the not trusting person, the person who had been betrayed, the person who had been abused, the person who had been hurt. It enabled me to have some space and has allowed me to tap into, there's like a joy and happiness in those spaces. Now, I like to do different meditations. I'll do free ones. I'll do Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you know him. We love Dr. Joe.
I've done his walking meditations. They're great.
Yeah. And so what I like about some of his is that he wants you to tap in, and he's not the only one. There are many meditations that tell you, like, go to that void. If I hadn't had that experience, I would probably think it was weird. Go to that void, and from that space, feel love, feel compassion, feel free. And again, I do many different meditations. Sometimes I don't do a guided at all. I'll just sit in silence.
But what is that void? Is that a relief?
To be honest, I don't know. So what Dr. Joe says, I've heard other metaphysical teachers, because I've studied that since that time, is that it's just that everything is consciousness. So this God source universe that we talk about is just consciousness. It's just conscious awareness. And so it's us just not identifying. So let's go back to lenses. It's a different lens, basically. So instead of it being the lens of the human, the 3D, that I'm just this body who's weak and going around and eventually I'm just going to die, it's almost like you take off that lens and you open up to a wider lens of just being consciousness. And this is what people say when they have like the NDEs, like when they say they cross over because their body technically is dead, but they're saying like they had all these amazing experiences. I think it's just a different lens. I think it's just perceiving something else beyond. And so it's what people call consciousness, right? So Dr. Joe talks about like going to that consciousness, and from that space, feeling joy and love and tapping into those feelings. And oh, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Growing up in a very unsafe environment, I never felt physically safe or emotionally safe. My parents were not safe spaces, and unfortunately, they also didn't have safe spaces. Luke, I never thought that I would feel safe in my body. But through meditation, I have found there's like an inner little space where it's totally my safety net. Like stuff could be happening on the outside. And if you feel safe on the inside, you can just maneuver all of that other outside stuff. And it's the same with love. You can have nothing on the outside, but feel full of love and gratitude for yourself and life. And that stuff doesn't bother you. You're like, oh, I'll just rebuild. And so it's an immense power that all of us are being guided to go back to. The 3D reality that we give so much credit, it's all about change. Everything changes, right? You grow older, even the bad times change, which is great news. So if anybody's struggling, the bad times change, but so do the good times. It's true. Everything is a flow in sort of this reality. But when you find that inner peace and that inner power, that stability, that inner love, that doesn't change. It's not waving and waxing. It doesn't. Once you tap in, and you can continue to go and tap in, that gives you that stability to be able to navigate those waters, if you may.
Awesome. So I'll change gears a little. What are some of the most common myths around compassion and self-love?
I would say that it's indulgent. So my mom and I actually were having a conversation about this just this weekend. She was telling me how as a kid she was told that it was inappropriate for you to look at yourself too much in the mirror.
Okay.
So sit with that. So some of the biggest, and this is kind of one of my favorite topics, some of the biggest myths that people talk about is that compassion is selfish or narcissistic, or loving yourself is narcissistic. That is pure BS. Let's talk about the origin of the word narcissistic. Okay. So there was this god called Narcissus. So it's a Greek mythology. This Greek mythological god that fell in love with its own reflection. So he saw his own reflection, fell in love with it. And I think either he drowned or he died because he was miserable because he couldn't be with him with that reflection. Okay. So people attribute that to loving yourself. You're looking at yourself too much in the mirror. You're loving yourself too much. Had Narcissus realized that he was always with the being he loved the most, had he realized that he was already it, that he fell in love with a reflection, not himself, then he would have realized that he didn't have to be miserable, right? Because he was always with himself, right? He fell in love with a reflection, an image, which was not real. That's what caused misery. So people attribute self-love and self-compassion as narcissistic, that the more you love yourself, that you're going to be egocentric. Some of the most egocentric people that I know, some of them, people who have behaviors that are narcissistic, do not love themselves. When you truly love yourself, you do not need other people to love you. Your cup overflows so much. It's not that you don't want it. Everybody loves love and to be loved, but you no longer need it. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever been in that situation where you get something, but you no longer need it? You're like, I can let it go, and it just comes to you.
Yeah.
It's the same way. When your heart is so full of love, you no longer need the love of others. You don't need to control their behavior. You don't need to change it. You are just so full of love that it flows out of you. People who have narcissistic behavior, need to control other people so they can be loved, so that they can have attention. It comes from the outside. So anyone who's trying to do something from the outside does not love themselves. It's not true self-love. The other thing is, going back to our conversation previous about criticism, is that people think that if you love yourself or are compassionate to yourself, you won't be motivated. It's so not true. In fact, self-criticism, it's like a law of diminishing returns. In the beginning, you can motivate yourself, right? In the beginning, it's a little bit, and you can motivate yourself by criticism, but you hit a plateau, and then there's like a really harsh decline.
Did,
The
did
people,
I,
there's yeah, yeah.
sorry to intrude, but this was a
Oh
huge
yeah,
one for me, right?
yeah,
Um, for so long, I had a fear that if I start thinking I'm enough and I start thinking I like myself, that my business will stop growing and I will stop having a drive towards success. So I just really
yeah,
resonated with that.
yeah. And so, interestingly, it actually limits you, because what happens is that you eventually burn out, right? So the majority, it's so funny. We have these stories in society about how people, like they're so, we kind of idolize all those people that, oh, like they burned through, and then, they work through, but then they succeeded at the end. Right. You see it in a lot of different professions, like, like becoming a chef, or, like in particular sports or whatever.
Business is
What they don't
even.
tell you is, yeah, but they don't tell you is the majority of people that burned out that didn't make it. So we look at the one off and we're like, oh, look at how successful they were. But the majority of people burned out. The majority of people had mental health issues, right? The thing about compassion and self love is that it motivates you in a different way. And it's actually more sustainable. It motivates you because you then do it out of your passions. You do it out of joy, not because you want to get something, but because you're living your dream, because you're doing it, because there's something within you that wants to express itself and wants to show it to the world. Like J.K. Rowling, even though she's unpopular with the whole Harry Potter thing, but Harry Potter, like books like that, people that have been successful that were just, they didn't think in terms of like, I'm going to do this to be successful. They're sharing their greatest passion with the world. And then it attracted many people because it has a magnetizing effect. So compassion doesn't mean that you just kind of left yourself off the hook. In fact, you want to live your dreams more, and it helps you get there because it helps you navigate those difficult waters.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like you're speaking about authenticity. And I mean, I think authenticity
Yeah.
is inherently attractive to others.
Yeah. Yeah. So think about it. Like, I think Brene Brown's the one that said that the opposite of
I know what you're
belonging
talking
is,
about.
yeah, I think it's the opposite of like belonging is actually like trying to fit in or something like that. Like,
Mm.
because it's true. When you want to be loved and you want it, and you think it has to happen externally, you will change who you are to fit in. And belonging is such a strong need, right? People will do anything to belong, including violate their own values. It's so scary for people to feel alone that they will do anything to belong and sometimes not be authentic to themselves. But what they don't realize is that the more authentic they are, the more they attract their tribe, the more that
You,
they are. Yeah. Go ahead.
well, again, I feel like you're talking directly
Yeah.
with me, right? Like it's like, um, I'll go back to kind of my alcoholism. A lot of that stemmed from me being, I guess, a quite anxiety-ridden child. And when I
Yeah.
found drinking and partying, it allowed me to, I guess, find a circle that I belonged in, right? Making and yeah, the irony is, since I've gotten sober, I've made so much more deep and authentic connections than I ever have been able to get to make prior. So
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, because it raised an important thought in my head, which is when you look at extremist groups, and so, that's one of the things I'm interested in, that extremism, when you look at extremist groups, and I was speaking to somebody who was a former white supremacist, and he talked about how
This is literally my
many,
next question.
yeah. So
Are you
it's,
talking about Tony McAleer? Is that
yeah,
right?
McAllister.
Yep,
Yeah, I love
yep, yep.
Tony.
Cool.
And so he was talking about, and I've also seen this in other members too, other people that I've spoken to. Those extremist groups use the language of belonging. They use the language of family and togetherness and support and even compassion. They co-opt it.
So,
And so they use that language for people that don't feel like they fit, so that they're like, you belong here. Let's spread hate, but you belong with us. So you'll do anything that we agree to. And people will do anything to not feel alone.
so the last person I had on the podcast, I haven't released it yet.
Yeah.
He was a heroin addict, kind of a gangster, stuff like that, right? And he spoke about exactly the same thing. He was an immigrant. His parents were an immigrant. They didn't speak English in the household. They were going through their own battles. He was the only non-white in his school. And what he found a sense of belonging was I guess what he calls the streets, right? So other
Yeah.
immigrants in Australia, there's a lot of immigrants from Asian countries, Pacific Islanders, stuff like that, and he found, I guess, a sense of belonging within these communities, and that led him to a life of heroin addiction, violence, and stuff like that. And it sounds like you're speaking exactly the same thing about these white supremacy communities. It just really resonated with me. He
Oh,
was speaking in
crazy.
exactly the same way.
It reminded me of that African saying about how, the child who is not loved will burn the village down to feel its warmth, right?
Oh
Like
wow,
it's sort of
yeah.
like that. Yeah. I don't know the exact wording. I wish I could find it. But it's sort of along the same lines. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. The child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth.
Wow.
And I think that's very powerful. I think it's true that
I
we
had that
seek
attitude
to
when I
be
was
loved and to be accepted.
I had that
Yeah.
attitude when I was 20, by the way. Yeah, I was very much like burn the world down because
Yeah.
nobody cares about me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is where parents, individuals, it's our responsibility to tap into our own love for ourselves first and then for others. And even for our enemies, for even those people that we struggle with, because punishment, isolation, separation only leads to the world we currently have. Whereas forgiveness and compassion actually brings us closer together and makes us feel less alone. And the reason, because I start off with self love, usually people don't like to start there, um, is because what I have found in my experience is when I gave to the people in my life and I didn't feel like it or I didn't have it, right? Like I felt like my bucket was empty, I became resentful. I I did things I didn't want to do. I said yes when I meant no. But when I took time to fill my cup and loved myself enough to have strong boundaries, to be able to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that now. A no to you is a yes to myself in this moment, but I can do this other thing instead, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. My relationship conflicts eased. I was able to really have better relationships with everyone in my life because again, I wasn't trying to control them or get them to do things and manipulate them and live a life of resistance. And so I think it's each of our responsibility to love and have compassion for ourselves and others, and also to live our dreams, to live our biggest, boldest dreams. The reason being is because when you are living your dreams, you're like a beacon and a magnet, and you show other people that they can do it. And when you're living your dreams, you don't need to oppress other people to be successful. You don't need to put power over or force yourself on people. you're just living your best life. And so each of us are responsible for working to get ourselves there. And so I think that's really our only job, and everything flows out from that space. When you feel full, when you feel you have enough, and going back to what we were saying about like how that fear, like that fear of, if I stop thinking this is enough, am I just gonna kind of, you know,
Do
diminish
nothing.
my success, financial abundance? It's actually the other way. The more you feel you have enough, the more the universe goes, oh, okay, yeah, she feels she has enough. So here's more than enough. Here's more than enough. Here's like, when you feel like, oh, I always have more than enough. That's all good. It kind of brings you more. But when you feel like I don't have enough, I don't have enough, I don't have enough, you could make a million and still it's not going to feel like it's enough, because that's the feeling, you're looking at it from a place of lack. And so it's interesting how the universe works that way. It works by opposites. I was telling someone else, I did like a 28-day, I think it's like get rid of 21 things for 28 days. Like just throw things out, like get rid of everything. So the universe doesn't like a vacuum. So at the end of that 28 days, I felt amazing because I'd cleared out so many things. And by the end of that 28 days, I started to get a whole bunch of free stuff. I had gotten rid of so many books. I ended up with more books than I had gotten rid of. I got rid of shoes. People gave me brand new and almost brand new shoes. I'm like, how does this happen? It's because you're creating space, you're creating opportunity.
I
That's
would
what I'm,
love to hear more about your time with Tony and any lessons learned from that experience.
yeah, for sure. So Tony was fantastic. So he wrote a book. Oh, I think it was Life Beyond Hate or Life After Hate.
I believe it's something
So
like that. Yeah, I checked it out
yeah,
last night.
so he had experiences in childhood that made him think he wasn't good enough. And so again, because of his need to belong, he started to hang out with people that started to do again, who, because they had hate for themselves in their heart, they started to express it out. And so he was actually quite a high member of the white supremacy group in Canada. He actually helped establish a lot of their communication because they use a lot of underground communication. And so, he was into spreading hate, and then he was a Holocaust denier and so on. And I asked him, I said, what flipped things for you? Like, what started the journey? And the first thing that he said was the love of his children. So the unconditional love of his children, that joy, that, in their eyes, he wasn't a white supremacist. He had hurt people. He was just their dad, and they loved him unconditionally. So that reignited that spark of love within him, because he had a lot of shame and guilt over what he did. One of the things we talked about was there's a reason why human beings have to dehumanize other human beings before they oppress them. Right? If you actually look at the Holocaust, the Jews were called ghetto rats, right? Black people have been called less than human. Why? Because we have an inherent sort of programming that prevents us from oppressing one another. So that's why we have to make each other less than human to justify it. So Tony had a lot of shame and guilt in his heart, which he was just oppressing because he was justifying it in his head. His need to belong was so strong. And so his children ignited that spark of love within him. And then he decided that he was kind of done with this life. He wanted a better life for his kids. And so he went to see a therapist called Dove Barron. And he didn't know this at the time, but Dove was Jewish. He is Jewish. So as Dove is helping him with his therapy, Tony divulges finally that he was a white supremacist, and Dove starts to laugh. Right. And then Tony's like, oh, like, what gives? And he's like, I'm Jewish. And that made Tony feel really crappy, because he's like, oh my God, he's a Jewish person. And Dove had nothing but forgiveness and love for Tony. Right. And so that made Tony think, how could you love me if I have done so many things to hurt your people? Right. How could you do that? And so that started his journey in trying to understand that this fear is fabricated. it's based on this hate is fabricated. It's based on fear. It's based on ignorance. And so the more we come closer together to get curious about one another, the more we will realize that there's more that unites us than divides us. Another great example that of a person I'm definitely working on getting on my podcast and on my documentary is Daryl Davis. Have you heard of him?
I have, yeah. I don't know where I've
Yeah.
seen him, but I've either watched a documentary or seen him on a few podcasts. He's really interesting.
Yeah, I think he was on a few podcasts. I think he had his I don't know if he has his own documentary. And so he's black jazz musician for those of you who don't know who he is. And he since he was little, he wanted to understand racism after he experienced an act of racism as a kid. And he was like, why do people hate me? Like, why do these people hate me when they don't even know me? So he became this amazing popular jazz musician, and he started to go to KK rallies, and he started to talk to like KK leaders and say, why do you hate me when you don't even know me? And his goal wasn't to change them, it was to understand them. And he got over 200 of them to leave the Klan just through dialogue. And it is really that understanding of sometimes the fears that we have are not based on anything real or anything concrete. It's just based on fear, and it's based on what somebody else tells us, what we accept from other people, somebody else's thoughts and beliefs. And so the willingness, the courage to be able to be curious, like this podcast says, the courage to be curious, the courage to be willing to love, I think is really important.
So I'm conscious of your time, Giselle, but I just, and I'm also aware that the internet keeps cutting out. I'm conscious of
Yeah.
your time, Giselle. I just wanted to briefly dive into your current project and your documentary. What's that about? What's the main message, and what are you trying to achieve there?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is one of those situations where I never thought I'd be doing this. I really honestly thought I was going to be working in the child welfare system forever and do my compassion work there, and then that was it. But it seems like universe has a bigger plan or a different plan for me. I wouldn't say bigger, but just different plan. And so I was talking to this woman who had brought compassion into the prison system, and I was picking her brain because I was at the time aiming to bring compassion into the child protection system. Right? There's so much trauma that is in the child welfare system, and then sometimes the work actually re-traumatizes the children. So I was trying to figure out, how do we work in a way that can be healing and bring families together and bring healing for the kids and the parents and so on. And so she talked to me for like 2 hours. Her name is Lara Naughton. And something within me literally said, ask her about the book. So I was like, okay. So I'm like, hey, do you have a book? And she's like, yes, I do. Didn't tell me much about it other than the title. And then, we closed up. I said, thank you very much. And I thought, I'm going to get this book as a thank you to her. She spoke to me for 2 hours out of her own time, like didn't get anything out of it other than the information I got to bring back to my work. I read this book, Luke. This book. So she was on Belize on vacation, and she asked God Source Universe for the most extraordinary love story. Very soon after, she gets kidnapped and assaulted and taken deep into the jungle and is about to get murdered. She did the only thing that she could do, which was deciding to have compassion and love for the person in front of her and see his humanity so that he could begin to see hers. And that's exactly what she did. She got curious about him. She started to see him as a person. She wanted to know more about him. And slowly he went from a person who was about to murder her, like literally was about to murder her because he didn't want to go to jail, to someone who started to care about her because he pretended he was her cab driver. That's how he managed to get her. He drove her back to her hotel and he told her, I want you to be safe. I don't want you to be hurt. Doesn't make any sense considering he's the one that harmed her, right?
Yeah.
And took her to the jungle and was about to murder her. But how she describes it is that they got through the other side of that, all that hurt, through love and compassion. And so that got me to be interested in other stories where people had used love to transform that conflict. And one of the things, I read growing up was Martin Luther King's work in terms of, you have to, love is the only thing that can turn an enemy into a friend. And, Nelson Mandela's work and the work of when you look at the Bible, Jesus talking about turn the other cheek. And so all of these spiritual teachers have talked about how love is the way to transform hate and fear, right? But where is the evidence, the proof in the pudding, right? Sort of, right? Because we see these people as these spiritual, amazing beings, but we're like, well, how can regular people do this, right? And so I started to investigate these stories, extraordinary stories. I have another woman who's a good friend of mine who chose to forgive her son's killer and help him. That transformed him. And he is now he helps the other inmates. He said that her forgiveness and her love completely changed him. I mean, he's still serving time for killing her son, right? And that wasn't anything that Rukai did. That was just the justice system said, you got to go to jail. You did it. You admitted it. But Rukai didn't want him to go to jail. She wanted to help him. And she says the true enemy is trauma. Right. And so she works towards helping people like the kid. And so I have all of these extraordinary stories of people that have used love and compassion to transform and alchemize these circumstances. And I think of it sort of like the Jedi move. Have you seen the Star Wars? You know how they always talk about that love was the way? But the problem is sort of like a half truth because they still use the same, they use violence. They still use the same, they killed people. They still use the same strategies as the other side. But there's a nugget of truth there in that I do believe that love has the power to transform. And when I have come at people, even people I struggled with true unconditional love, like no expectation for them to change, no expectation of anything like that, they do change. They transform how they behave how they behave towards me. And they'll even I've had circumstances where people divulge things and you're like, I don't want to know with the stuff that you did. That's not, I'm just coming to you with the greatest amount of love that I have in this moment. My intention isn't to do. So I do believe this love has this power to transform. And so I have stories throughout the world, including an organization out of Africa that brings people on both sides of the genocide to come together and to teach young children and how they've been able to bring them together in reconciliation. It's incredible. And so I wanted to show people that the things that we've been doing, the punishment, the isolation, all of stuff doesn't work. It really doesn't work, right? It doesn't, the recidivism rate of people that are in jail, it's high. They come back to jail because we're asking them to do something extraordinary, asking them to become loving and compassionate people, but surround them with other people with the same energy, beliefs, and traumas, right? And so if this is truly the way, like Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela and all these spiritual teachers, you got Gandhi, you've got, you had Jesus, all of these incredible people said that this is the way. My desire is that my documentary is going to be illustrating that it is true and the how. How do we do this? What is the starting point? How can we even get to that point where we could truly love one another? And so that is the purpose of the documentary. And so I have a team of researchers that are working with me, as well as all the people that have these extraordinary stories to tell. Right now, we're working towards getting funding. The majority of our funders were to be the US, but now there seems to be this thing about Canada and the US. So we're having to find funding somewhere else. But we're in the process of acquiring funding. So, yeah.
Well, Gissele, what a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate you coming on. Where can people find more about your work?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the podcast. This was a really great conversation, and I look forward to hearing you that you're going on your journey towards self-love. which is amazing. So
Fantastic.
my center is called Maitri Center, and I have it's MAITRICENTRE.com. I have a podcast called Loving Compassion with Gissele, and I am currently working on our documentary, as well as, yeah, that's, I'm actually writing a second book, Reimagining Education, for the reasons we talked about. I'm actually co-writing it with my daughter, because it's interesting, her perspective and my perspective on education, and I see a lot of the same things that you and I talked about that still exist today. And we are talking about how can we reimagine systems that enable us to flourish the most, that create flourishing citizens. And that's what we're currently doing. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gissele.